Welcome to Wellness with John, resources to help you thrive. I'm John Peters. And in this video, I'm going to talk about stress and anxiety and the issue of being in control. Okay. It's an issue for me. It's an issue for you. It's an issue for everybody. And it can cause stress to spiral. But if we understand it and work with it correctly, we can lower our stress. And stay tuned to the end because I'm going to talk about 3 different ways to actually master this issue. Stay tuned. Okay, so in today's video, I want to talk about the issue of being in control. And I don't necessarily mean being controlling or being in control in the way that we talk about a controlling person who's trying to manipulate or kind of govern how a particular thing is going. What I'm talking about is that when we are stressed, our sense of control gets skewed. And when there is something consequential that it's happening to us or we're worried is going to happen, and we have a low sense of control over that, then we tend to feel more stress. So they interact with each other, and this is part of what can cause a stress reaction to spiral because something can happen that we don't feel in control of. And regardless of the content, the fact that we don't feel in control of it can actually cause us to be stressed because our brain actually just says, is there something that matters? Am I in control? If I'm not in control and it matters, my stress system is going to get fired off because that means that I might be in danger, right? And the problem, of course, as I said, is that once the stress reaction happens, it skews our perceptions because the way it changes the brain and it makes it more likely that we're actually going to perceive ourselves as not being in control, right? And this is a negative feedback loop that's going to cause a stress spiral and cause us to decompensate and not cope effectively, right? In fact, back in the 1980s, there was a stress scale. So there was a standardized set of questions in it's what we call an instrument to measure subjective stress. It's called the perceived stress scale. I'll put a link down in the description because you can click on the link and actually take the test and score it. It's a little bit complicated in how you score it, but if you read the instructions correctly below the test, you can score it and kind of see what that test says about you. But the perceived stress scale was a scale that basically, if you look at the content of the questions, it's basically asking in different ways, is there something that's consequential that you're experiencing that you don't feel like is in your control, right? So it asks these 10 questions and you score them, and then you add up your score and you see what the test is saying that you have in terms of low, medium, and high level of perceived stress. But the content of the questions is largely focused on whether or not you have a sense of being in control of what's happening, right? And let me pause for a second and say, when I talk about being in control, I'm not only talking about agency, like, for example, if I'm in a car and I'm holding the steering wheel, I have the ability to control where the car is headed because I can turn the steering wheel, right? I have direct actual control over the steering of the car, right? But control also matters in terms of just how we perceive what we know about a situation. So do I know what's necessary in order to understand something so that I don't feel like things are chaotic and out of control in terms of even what I understand about something. So, for example, like if somebody was really mean and they gave somebody a Sprite, which is normally a not non-caffeinated drink, but they had dosed the Sprite with a bunch of caffeine, enough for like 5 cups of coffee, right? The person who's given the Sprite, who doesn't know what's in the Sprite, drinks the Sprite, and then a short time later is starting to feel the effects of the caffeine, which even if they've drunk coffee and caffeinated sodas before, they're not going to know where that's coming from, right? So they're going to start feeling agitated and that unease that comes from having too much caffeine on board. And they might start worrying they're having a heart attack or that they're extremely sick or they're dying or something, even though they might have a dose that's not lethal or actual, dangerous dose of caffeine. But the fact that they're experiencing something that then they don't understand, right? But if the same thing happened and you handed someone a Sprite and you said, "Here, I want you to drink this Sprite, but I want you to know before you drink it, I have put caffeine into the Sprite. I've put 5 cups of coffee worth of caffeine into that Sprite. Go ahead and drink it." Okay. If the person bizarrely goes ahead and drinks it at that point, and then they start feeling the effects because you told them about it, they know what's in the caffeine. They know where those physiological effects are coming from, and they're not going to feel as flipped out and get themselves to the emergency department to be evaluated for a heart attack, right? So the sense of control has to do with, like, what do I know about the world that influences my perceptions about what I'm experiencing in my ongoing experience of my world, right? It's about perception. It's not about objective reality in terms of, am I directly in control? Because if somebody dosed my Sprite with caffeine, I don't have direct control to just magically make that caffeine disappear. Now, it'll wear off in time, but I can't will the caffeine to exit my body simply because I don't want it there. I'm not in that type of control. But if I know about the caffeine in my Sprite, I have a sense of control because of the perception that's informed by the information, right? So back to control. When things happen in our life that cause us to feel out of control, and this can be high level control, like, oh, my boss won't give me a raise, but it could be immediate control too, even like I'm walking down the stairs and I trip and I almost fall, right? Again, our brains don't consider the level of abstraction of what's in control or not. Our brains just care about, am I in control or not? Am I in danger or not, right? And we're going to exploit this when we get to the solutions of how to work with this later, especially solution number 1. But just know that in any moment where you're feeling elevated stress, it's very, very likely that part of what's going on in that moment is a perception of not being in control of some element of your situation that your brain thinks is consequential. Whether a valid assessment or not, your brain thinks something is consequential that's not in your control or that you're not well informed about in order to at least be able to make sense of it. Okay. So that's just a common feature of how perception works with triggering the stress response, right? And as I said earlier, one issue with that is that when the stress response gets triggered, certain brain changes occur that actually skew perception to make it likely that the way we're appraising the situation will actually cause us to focus on elements that we're not in control of, thus lending to a greater sense of not being in control, which is going to make the danger signals go even higher at that point, right? So here's the thing. And here are 3 different ways to hack this to your benefit in order to cope better with your stress, but directly to help you not feel out of control in order to stop that stress spiral that leads to the thing that I just explained. As I said, our brain doesn't care what the focus is. Our brain only cares about, do I feel in control or not, right? And this is why I commonly teach the strategy of concrete thinking to people. And I've made 2 videos on the topic of concrete thinking. So after this video, if you'd like to come back to this point in here and check out the link that I'll post up here, you can watch the 2 videos on concrete thinking to get a full explanation of that technique. But basically, when we get stressed, the part of our brain that can focus on things that we're in control of tends to get inhibited because the part of our brain that is focused on things we're out of control of gets all lit up. concrete thinking is a strategy for reversing that and moving the brain activity back to the part where we are focused on stuff that we can control. And the reason it works is because, as I said a minute ago, our brain doesn't care what it is. I'm out of control about this. I'm in control about that. Therefore, there's some sort of balance. I'm not fully out of control because I'm in control about this. The thing we're in control of doesn't actually have to be consequential and matter in terms of whatever this thing is over here. Okay. So one strategy for concrete thinking is for a minute or two, just slowly and deliberately and calmly name what you're doing. I'm sitting at a desk. I'm standing up. I'm turning left. I'm taking some steps toward the door. I'm opening the door. I'm turning on the faucet. I'm opening the lid of the washer. I'm putting soap on the sponge. I'm washing the dish. See where I'm going with this? We're just naming the rudimentary kind of explanations of action by action, what we're doing in the simplest terms possible. And we just do that, and then we do it again, and then we calmly do it again, and then we calmly do it again. A lot of my patients, when I talk to them, on my initial meeting with them when they're going through a stressful period, will tell me that they spontaneously just started doing this, which makes them feel a little crazy because that's kind of crazy making to start talking out loud about rudimentary things that you're doing because we don't normally do that. But it's actually an extremely functional way to rebalance the brain's sense of being out of control. Because again, if I'm out of control about, let's say, a job situation, and then I get home and I realize that I'm stressed about the job, and then I start doing the concrete thinking, my brain doesn't care about whether, putting the soap on the sponge and washing the dish is going to solve the work situation. But what my brain does care about is, am I currently doing something that I feel like I'm in control of? And if the answer is yes, which it's going to be if you do concrete thinking correctly, then your brain says, okay, I'm not fully out of control. I can reverse the danger signal and come back to code yellow and not have to stay up at code orange or even code red, right? So that's the benefit of concrete thinking, is that you temporarily give yourself, your brain, in order to have the perceptions, activities that are solidly in your control. And your brain is going to say, wait, I'm in control of something, so I'm not fully out of control. And if I'm not fully out of control, things aren't the disaster that I thought they were 5 seconds ago, right? So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is to examine how you might be shoulding all over yourself, right? So back in the 80s, there was this author in the New Age movement who talked about shoulding a lot. And a lot of people in the cognitive behavioral therapy movement back in the 80s would talk about shoulding, and we still talk about it today. But basically, if you should on yourself, you're coming up with shoulds about either your own behaviors or your state, or what other people should or shouldn't be doing, or what the universe should or shouldn't be doing for you or to you. And so one way to get at the shoulds that are active in your brain is to sit down with a notebook and write as many sentences that include the word should as you can think of that have to do with your current or recent experience. Okay. So, when people do that kind of exercise, sometimes they might write things like, I shouldn't have waited so long to start that project at work, or Sarah shouldn't have said that blah, blah, blah to me yesterday, or it shouldn't be raining on the day off that I have to go take a hike. So basically, come up with as many sentences that include the word should. And what you're going to find is that at least some of those sentences are going to point toward ideas that you have about yourself, other people, or the universe that are contributing to your sense of not feeling in control. Now, you might come up with a should that you say, yeah, that should leads me to feeling negative feelings or having negative thoughts or reactions. But I agree with the should. It really should be that way. And then you can take a second level examination of, should I work with that should, or should I leave the should as it is, right? Is it acceptable to me in terms of thinking that way and living with the consequences? Or do I want to have a different kind of outcome, and do I want to make that should more flexible, right? An example of that would be people should always be on time and should never be more than 30 seconds late, okay? that's such a tight, inflexible should that I'm going to get upset about people being late all the time, because sometimes people are more than 30 seconds late, even if they're only like a minute and a half late to a meeting. But if I look at a should like that, then I say, wait, that's leading me to being frustrated with people too much of the time, and I don't like being frustrated. So I'm going to revise that should and say, yeah, people should be on time, but they should be not more than 5 minutes late, let's say, or something like that. Or or they should call me if they're going to be more than 5 minutes late, something like that. But sometimes we can revise our shoulds in order to not be as stressed out about the world. And that's something that can flow out of that strategy. So that's strategy number 2. Strategy number 1 is concrete thinking. Strategy number 2 is examine your shoulds and see if you're shoulding all over yourself. Strategy number 3 is talk to somebody. When we talk to a friend or a pastoral counselor or a therapist, part of what we do is we speak out loud our concerns, our fears, our goals, our strategies, all the things that come to bear on a situation. So if I'm having a troubling time, let's say I'm having a bad day, and I sit down with my friend and I say, hey, can you bear witness to me talking about my bad day? And my friend says, yes, I'll support you that way. Then in talking through that, I'm going to talk through what I think about things and what I'm paying attention to and my expectations and my shoulds. And what this tends to lead to is less of a sense of being out of control, thus more of a sense of being in control. Now, maybe I don't solve the situation. Maybe that one conversation doesn't actually provide all the answers and I have the solutions to my issues. But talking to someone tends to help people feel less out of control. And this is one of the reasons that therapy is supportive no matter what the issue is that people bring to it. Because when you get the opportunity to talk with somebody, our brains are just wired to kind of configure themselves more in a sense of, okay, I know what's going on in the universe because of this conversation that's going on between me and this other person. I mean, think of that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where he had his friend Wilson because he was stuck on the island by himself, right? He needed Wilson because as a human being, that character is needing at least one extra person to talk through the issue with in order to not feel out of control, right? So that's strategy number 3 is talk to somebody in order to not feel as out of control. And so try those 3 things in order to help reverse that stress spiral of something not being in your control, causing stress, and then the brain changing because of the danger signal and the way that the brain skews perception and causing you to feel even more out of control, right? So hopefully you like this type of content. And if you find it helpful, hit the like button and feel free to subscribe to the channel because it helps me grow my channel. And one last thing that I want to tell you about before I leave is just that I have a free ebook that teaches easy to learn stress management techniques that can help you start lowering your stress and anxiety today. And I will put a link down in the description below that you can click on, and I'll email you a PDF version of the ebook to help you start learning how to lower your stress today. Okay? Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in an upcoming video.